Hi everyone, welcome to Inventive Mind. Thank you for joining me. My name is Gayani and I am an intellectual property and business law attorney and an entrepreneur and intuitive. Today I actually have a really cool guest, another one of my interviews, Lisane Basquiat from, did I mispronounce your name?
No, you did good. You did really good. I'm
So
impressed.
I asked you to join me because, this channel is about bringing you information about certain, paths and bringing you people that I find interesting and that are entrepreneurs, small business owners, so business owners, and who have done different type of things. So um, with that, I will just put my usual disclaimer that this is for informational purposes only. If you have specific questions, please connect with the practitioner in those areas. And I will put all the information that we are discussing, any kind of links below this video. So, there's other videos on my channel about other things, intellectual property, for instance, trademarks, copyright patents, and the business law matters, agreements, and so those are usually shorter videos. Those are about bite size, and these interviews are a bit longer just because we are getting into discussion about how somebody, their journey, what their background is, and also they're sharing some tips for entrepreneurs or small business owners or personal development side or mindfulness. So these are going to be a little bit longer. And thank you again for joining. And I would love to introduce Lisane. And I think I'm a little nervous. That's why I'm mispronouncing you. And I feel
I
like
know, and we've
you know,
spoken so many
I
times.
know.
We've hung out and everything. I get it. I host a podcast, and sometimes it can be a person that I've known for years, and I'll get on, and I'm like, ah,
Yeah. So
it's
I
okay.
apologize. And then I also wanted to give a little bit of her background before I will ask her to fully introduce herself. She is the owner of Hera Hub Carlsbad, which is in San Diego, Carlsbad area in California, which is a co-working space for women entrepreneurs and small businesses, female focused. I would say, because there are men and women who are part of these group. I am part of Hera Hub also with Sorrento Valley, and Lisan she is a teacher and a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, which you hear as NLP. She's also a master practitioner of hypnotherapy. She has license and certifications in mental health, mental and emotional release, MER therapy, and she's an advanced theta healer. So there's so many things. I'm just gonna ask you, Lisan, to introduce yourself, your background a little bit, and then we could go from there.
Okay. I'm really excited to be here this morning, Gayani. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I know I have a challenging name to pronounce, so don't worry about that. We were joking around about that before we actually started recording, about two women with very unique names
Yeah,
and
my
the
name is
challenges.
totally easy. It's like, yeah, no. I, so
Yeah.
anyway.
But I'm really excited and really appreciate the fact that you invited me on this morning. Thank you very much. And believe it or not, and I apologize because some of it has to do with my preparation for the conversation. I did not realize you were an intuitive. You said, and I thought so, but then you said it, and I was like, oh wow, I've never asked you about that.
That's because I've been in the spiritual closet, as they call it. So I've been slowly emerging out of my cocoon about that.
Yes, yes.
Because I think because of the identifiers we use for ourselves and there's judgments involved. Because I've been in science, I consider myself a scientist, and
Mhm.
I've been in science for 13 years, and I was in a PhD program, left that, came to law school, but I have a master's there, and I'm an attorney. So I think with those labels, there is a judgment I perceive, I think, a lot more than others, that I feel
Mm-hmm.
like if I tell people if I'm intuitive or that I'm in also do these other things, that they will think I'm not being that I am not a true something other like a true scientist or true attorney, that I'm into too much into woo woo, that connotation, which
Yeah, I
is very,
absolutely get that.
but I do think it's important to being the journey I've been on is I've been owning up to my becoming more clearing my throat chakra, I would say, and owning up to my identity, which I feel like my true identity. So I started actually telling people and sharing my insights. And because I've been doing mindfulness since 2014, meditation. So I feel like when you meditate, and I have been doing a lot of self work too, that everything kind of comes together and you
Mm-hmm.
start
Yeah.
this expansive journey. So that's why I was really drawn to you. Like we have known each other now for over a year, I think, because since I
It
joined.
feels longer.
I
It
know,
feels
right?
longer. I heard you last week say that you had, we'd known each other for a little over a year, and I don't know, it seems, or maybe it's just been a really long year,
It's
you
been
know.
I think it's that, and also there's like when you're in these soul's journeys, I think you meet people that you feel like you know them, probably
Hmm.
because you know them from other lifetimes and their soul families that you have came
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
So that's me really be owning up to who I am. So anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt your introduction. Please share your background a little bit, what you do, and how you became owner of all these different businesses that you own.
Of course, by the way, this is not wine, it's cold brew. So it's
Ah,
9 o'clock in the morning. And so
yes.
I'm drinking this and I'm looking at it. I'm like, wow, it looks like wine, but it's not yet, later on. um, yes, I thank you for that. And you didn't interrupt me at all. I'm from Brooklyn. And so in the Northeast, we typically talk over each other. It's just a thing. So to me, it's like it was fine. And I apologize in advance for talking over you at any point during this interview. So I really like it. Thank you for actually talking a little bit about your own journey, because it really, there's a resonance with my journey, right? And so I started, I'm the daughter of a Haitian father who immigrated to this country when he was 17, and by himself, not with his family.
Mhm.
And I think about that now, and I'm like, wow, a 17-year-old man coming to this
Mhm.
country and by himself, not speaking the language, coming from a very warm country in the middle of the winter. And my father used to tell that story to us when we were younger. And you know how kids are. We were just like, and he would say, I came to this country with a toothbrush in my pocket and, you know, story, right? And it was the story, it really was. And he came in the middle of the winter. And so um, I'm the daughter of a Haitian father who emigrated to this country uh, from the midst of the genocide that was going on in Haiti at the time with Papa Doc.
Oh, wow.
And my mother was Puerto Rican, and she lived in Brooklyn. And so my father and mother, so that kind of starts the story for me, and it has a lot to do with what I'm doing today and the woman that I am today. So my parents being, my mother was Puerto Rican, but sometimes uh, uh, it seems like it's not the same country. So I kind of had that experience growing up in Brooklyn in the 60s. And for me, as the daughter of those parents, it was really the trajectory of my life was intended to be that of a professional person.
Mhm.
So Haitians, when you're Haitian, you're like a doctor, a lawyer, some kind of white collar profession, that is what you do. And so I, was, marching down that path to some extent. And I won't get into the entire story. It's a really long story. But what I will say is that years later, as an adult, I worked for a financial services company, and most of my corporate career was within the financial services industry. Very male dominated, very corporate, very structured and formulaic in the way that you delivered results and decided what the results were going to be, and very not of the heart, And so I was on this trajectory, and I was this person who was operating within a corporate environment and within the corporate, following the corporate rules to some extent. But I also always had this deep spirituality, this deep energetic connection, this deep love and connection to God and to the questions, that don't often present themselves in our day-to-day lives. Questions about, who I am, why am I here, and what am I feeling? What is this energy that I'm feeling in, connecting to people? And what are the words that people are saying beneath the words,
Yeah.
And I was an executive working within business transformation for a large financial services company. And there's a long story to it, but somehow or another, I became a coach. I got certified as a coach. And I ran a coaching business in parallel with the work that I was doing in business transformation and organizational change management.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to feel this kind of tension between doing the things that are very kind of structured, like you get married, you buy a home, you get a couple of nice cars, you have some great kids, you kind of walk that path. That was the path that was very accepted, even in my own family. Like, I didn't come from a family where there was talk about, deep spiritual connection, and so I got to a point like you, where I started to realize, you talked about jumping out of the spiritual closet. I got to a point where I started to realize that I was actually in a spiritual closet. And so what I would find is that the work I was doing, when I was doing it one-on-one or in one-on-one conversations, I felt very comfortable, sharing and expressing who I really was, and working with other people to help them to release, the spirituality that was within them. When it came to doing so publicly, I was very uncomfortable with that, because I was afraid that if I were to share that part of myself, that I wouldn't be taken seriously.
That's exactly the fear I had been having, and I've been releasing. But yeah.
Yes. And I started to recognize it, because I realized that even when I think back on, for example, the website that I had way back then for that company, I think about the language and how far removed I was from even the language. Like, if you were to know me, and I'm a pretty warm person, and I connect, to people, but if you were to see my website back then, it was like, it was so far away. It was very structured. It was very kind of like, and I'll help you, meet your goals. And so there came a point where I had this experience, and this was it started in 2007, when an aunt of mine, who was a bit of a surrogate mom for me, she passed away.
Okay.
And then and I was raised by my dad, by the way. So my parents co-parented, and I was raised, my sister, my brother, and myself were raised by my dad. And there was this time, Gayani, and I had always had this incredible faith, always, and connection and comfort in that. And I went through this period between 2007 and 2008 where I lost this aunt of mine, Martha, and a, uh, a young cousin-in-law. So my sister's husband's, my brother-in-law's cousin's daughter,
Oh,
who was
wow.
very young, passed away. Um, my mother passed away. I filed for, my ex-husband and I started the process of divorce. My father got very ill. My stepmother got very ill, and I had a hysterectomy. And so
Oh,
all
wow.
of this happened over the course of 12 months, maybe
Wow.
13 months. And I left my corporate job,
It's, I
so
think
everything.
it just sounds like what you're talking about is what they term these days as dark night of the soul, or like
I
that
don't think I even had that yet. Like that happened after.
right
Because
after, right?
at the time I was so busy trying to like figure out what was happening,
Like everything
because
is shifting.
yes, and I had always had work as something to fall back on. So, there's these anchors, right? And so I had, if things were not great at home, I always had work, and here I didn't have either. And I was in this really uncharted territory for me, for my life, similar to the territory that we're all in globally right
Yeah.
now, where things were so different from anything that I had ever experienced before. And I did not know what to do. I couldn't move forward. I didn't know how to move forward.
Mhm.
And I knew that I couldn't go back. And left and right just didn't seem, you know, as at the way to go. And so I went through this period of really trying to uh, find meaning in what was going on, and also to get to a point where I really began to lean into the coaching that I had done all those years,
Mhm.
and the training that I had, and how to coach myself out of and through, really difficult, situations. And yeah, and so that was I guess that's the story of how I came out of the spiritual closet, right? And
Yeah.
so
I think it's also like what's the initiation is and how that shifting, and is that how you end up taking neuro-linguistic programming? Is that the leading into?
that came later. That came later. So all of that happened, and then I got to a point where my daughter was in college at the time, and I started to have conversations with people who were talking about wanting to do something, but they were going to do it when they retired. These great
Mhm.
plans, you know, and all of those plans were far enough away from them that they didn't actually have to do them, right?
Mhm.
And as I was having a conversation with a client one day who was talking about something that he was going to do when he retired with his wife, and I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I went back and started to think about some of the things that I had in my mind, some of the things that I wanted to accomplish.
Mhm.
And one of them was to live where there were mountains and water, close by, in the air, accessible. At the time I was living in the Northeast. So I moved out to California. And
I just laughed
uh,
just because I have my background set as Torrey Pines. It's like my favorite place here in San Diego.
oh, is that what that is? I
That's
wondered.
the
Yeah.
broken hill behind me.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I yeah, so anyway, so I moved out here. My daughter was in college. My plan had been to rent my house, and I when she got out of school, and things shifted and changed. My father passed away in 2013. And so I was not going to go back permanently or
Mhm.
full time. And so what I decided to do was I became bicoastal. And so I live here and also in the Northeast.
Mhm.
I own a business here, and also own Shaping Freedom, which is a personal growth company. Um, And I, maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, I started, somehow or another, I fell into taking a course on neurolinguistic programming. And I had been a certified coach through IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional and Personal Empowerment and Coaching. I went to take this NLP course, Gayani, and it was a 4-day course. I went, someone had mentioned it, and I, thought about, I was like, wow, that sounds interesting. Let me just go.
Yeah.
And there was a 4-day program, and it was taught by the Empowerment Partnership. And I went to this 4-day course, and the practitioner course is pretty inexpensive. And I went to this 4-day thing, and I sat down, and everything that I knew about coaching, everything that I'd learned about coaching made perfect sense. So where coaching was here, I realized that NLP, neuro-linguistic program, was the foundation on which all coaching is really built. And so what neuro-linguistic programming is, do you mind if I share a little bit about what it is, what it's about?
I really wanted to know because I've been interested in the topic. I haven't done, I have read about it a little bit, but not really done any in-depth research.
Excellent. Yay.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, okay, let's think about we had a conversation about your computer earlier,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
All right, so think about a computer, okay? A computer, think about the software within a computer. So there's the computer, and then you have different programs that are run that operate within the computer, within the environment of the computer, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there are programs that are run to give you a specific result, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And those programs run because of the way that they were programmed, what they were programmed to do, the results that they were programmed to achieve for the user. Neurolinguistic programming is the understanding of that, the understanding that ultimately we really, as human beings, are programmed for specific results. And we're mostly programmed for those results through the language that's used and the language that attaches itself to the functioning of our mind, right? So it really is a study of the way the mind works to achieve specific results, the language that's used in order to achieve specific results.
It's for me, when I read about it, and again, it's very superficial, knowledge on this subject. What I gathered is something about like how you're reprogramming like the subconscious thought that's running behind you.
Your unconscious mind, which is based on a lot of the study of Carl Jung. And so it's Jung, I'm sorry. And so it's really about those programs that you're running internally and the way that you process information based upon those programs that you're running internally within your unconscious mind, right? And so, for example, if you think about, and this is an old term, but I know that computers, have you ever heard about defragging a computer?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so this is like old thing, right? You don't do that with a Mac, right? But back in the day, there was this thing that you could run for your computer, for your operating system, where you would defrag your computer. And if you looked at it, you would literally see rows and rows of information, right? And then you'd see holes and pockets within those rows of information. And defragging the computer is something you would run with the goal of getting rid of those holes, those gaps within the program, the information that's in your computer. Neurolinguistic program is very much like that. It's about defragging the ways that you are internally, the ways that you're fragmented internally in the way of internal conflict, in the way of maybe wanting to reach a specific goal and but having thought patterns and behaviors that are actually in conflict with you reaching those goals. It's looking at the language that you're using, the language that you use both externally to other people and the language that you use within yourself in order to either move you toward the results that you want or to turn you away from the results that you want. It's really also about paying attention to the words that you hear people say, because the things that we say are essentially programming us at the very unconscious level to do, to perform the behaviors that we're performing. Right. So as
Yes.
an example, and this is an example that someone gave me many years ago, imagine if you were walking down the street. This is a terrible example. It's a New York example. Imagine that you're walking down the street and someone comes up to you and just starts yelling at you, just randomly, not someone you know. You're walking down a crowded street and someone comes up and they start yelling at you, right? There's a couple of different ways that you can process that. One is you could ignore the person and keep walking, and just think, wow, that person's having a bad day, right? And keep walking. Or you could, if you have a story that's running within you that says that you're a victim, or that says people don't respect me, or that says, I don't know, I'm an easy target, for
Yes.
example, you might process that experience very, very differently, right? The third way is this happens and then you respond to it with anger. And that's because it kind of triggers that angry response in you, and then you get into combat with the person. And so the ways that and that's a very kind of silly, random example, but whatever it is that we choose to do, everything to do with our thoughts, our beliefs, the way that we've programmed ourselves, the ways that we were programmed, and then the ways that we reinforce that programming each and every single day based on the words that we're using. I feel like I gave you the longest winded.
No, I love it because I was just, I was just thinking it's, I've been listening to Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes.
and I think there's some overlap in the way I'm processing what you were saying is that whole reaction, the emotional reaction, how you get triggered, the series of event, and the that book is for me what I'm getting from it, because I do think wherever you are when you read something or listen to something, you get different messages. So we could both read the
Absolutely.
exact same thing but get a
Mm-hmm.
different what you get. So in that book, I felt like what part of it that it's teaching is to step back from that emotional triggers. Like if something
Mm-hmm.
happening, like almost step back and see that all the things that are you yourself is reacting to, right? Like in
Mm-hmm.
this case, you're crossing the road and this random person come and start screaming, and while we are talking about this, so people who are listening to this, they're going to be imagining a person too. It could be a woman
Mm-hmm.
or man, what type of race, all of that
Yeah.
comes in because of your like all that programming in your background, right? That
It's the
kind of.
way you see. It's the way you see things. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can, but there's a little bit of a feedback with I think the not the feedback, like the video is a little bit sometimes little slow, but I have found that it happens sometimes with Zoom.
Is that better?
So yeah, it's for me, I
Okay.
had no trouble listening. I just like
The
sometimes
landscapers are outside
oh, I
doing
can
their thing,
hear.
and it sounds, I know that these are really good AirPods. I think they're noise canceling, but I was concerned about that.
No, I could hear you well, and I do apologize for anybody if you're hearing the like a fan on the background. That's my computer, like having
Yeah.
a running its fan. That's why we were talking about the computer before. So I want to honor your time and also get to like shaping shaping the freedom that you do, and kind of go through some tips that you wanted to share. So I was wondering if you could share what that is, and if somebody's interested, how they could find you, all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for giving me a moment to talk about that. So Shaping Freedom is a company that I founded that is really based on healing, not healing because we're not broken people, but really cleaning up the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus is on in addressing any misalignment that's going on inside, in addressing any inner conflict, and getting to a point where you are in good rapport, in a good relationship with yourself. The results of that you will see in the world around you. They'll be reflected in the world around you, by defragging any of the places within you. You will be on the path to achieving the results that you want to achieve in your life. And that ultimately will impact your legacy and your family. And that's really what my bottom line focus is on. It's on cleaning up the relationship that you have with yourself, so that we can, in our familial legacy, clean up also any of those things that need to be cleaned up, so that we can have more powerful families and more better congruence within our families. I have a podcast called the Shaping Freedom Podcast with Lisane Basquiat. We have a Facebook group, and I was supposed to have a tour that was launching right in the middle of this pandemic that we're in. So that program that was supposed to be in person is now going to be moved to a virtual platform. And that's starting on July 19th. And if you go to the Shaping Freedom group, you'll see information about that. The tips that I wanted to give are really, I was kind of thinking about that as we were talking, about what would be the best thing to share during this conversation. We're in the middle of a shelter in place, situation that is absolutely uncharted territory for all of us here in the world. Actually, it's the first time that we as a global community are experiencing something at the same time with each other, even though we're very far apart. And so what I wanted to talk about are a couple of tips on how to stay in tune with yourself during this experience. How's that?
I
Want to
love
talk
it.
about that?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
I think we only have like few minutes, because I know you have another appointment, so I just want to honor your time too.
Absolutely. So, how to nurture your relationship with yourself. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. So the first thing is listen to yourself. And that sounds so simple, right? But it truly is paying close attention to what it is that you are saying, because the intelligence really resides within yourself. So what that means is creating routines for yourself where you are regularly checking in. I know you talked about meditating earlier on in our conversation. I don't know whether we were on or off camera, but you talked about the fact that you meditate. And it really is one of the most important things that you can do to allow yourself to slow down enough to hear what it is that you're saying inside of you. And what I mean is, if you are reaching for something or having a conversation, and when you feel that tension or some kind of stifling within your body, that's hearing yourself, right? So I'm sure that we know of times where you were in the middle of a conversation and you were getting ready to say something, and you felt something inside of you that said, don't say it, or don't touch that, or don't do that. That is a communication that you're having with yourself Pay attention to that, because the more you honor and pay attention to that and trust yourself, the better and more satisfied with your results you will be. So meditation, or finding some kind of way to quiet yourself down enough to actually build your ability to hear yourself and sense what's going on within yourself, is
Mhm.
key. Meditation can happen a lot of different ways. It doesn't always have to be sitting on a mountaintop, doing
Yeah.
this. You can do walking meditations.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just taking a minute out in the middle of the day, especially now with what's going on in the world with, being on Zoom calls all day and so much information that's, swirling around us. Give yourself a minute so that you can actually hear yourself. Number two, take 100% accountability for everything that is happening in your life. What, you may be saying, but there are things that are happening that have nothing to do with me, and he did that, or she did that, or she said that. Yes, yes, yes. And if you put yourself in the position of taking 100% accountability for your life, what you will find is that as you clean things up within yourself, that the results of that will start to be reflected outside of yourself. So if something is going on, for example, if you are in a job that you don't like and you feel like the job is stifling you can either focus on your boss or the elements of the job that are upsetting to you, or you can look at what this says, what it is that you can do to change your own situation. Don't focus on other people, focus on yourself. Take 100% accountability. Um, and pay attention to how you're contributing to your own story. Who are you in your story? Are you the victim? Are you the hero? Are you the supporting character in your own story? Pay attention to which character you actually are and make sure that you are actually operating as the character that you want. That's 3. 4 is, let's see. What would 4 be?
Maybe owning
Can
your
we go
own
with the
story.
3?
Yeah, we could go with 3. I think, I think what you were saying really resonate for me, because it's that whole thing about owning your power and
You have
standing,
to.
you have to. And then the accountability, I do know that when somebody say, oh, you had to take 100% accountability of your life, what's happening to you, there's a lot of like feeling of unfairness, especially if there are things that are happening that you feel that you have nothing to do with and you didn't gain it. But I think I look at it this way, because it does have a trigger for me too. And I take a look at it, it's not, you're saying that all these, if there's something bad happening or some kind of a disease, it's not you are saying you are to blame, but it's more about taking power back and saying, this is what I can do. And,
Taking accountability, yeah, for yourself, for your
yeah,
role in this. We can sit
yeah,
here all day, we could sit here all day blaming other people. Like, I'm upset about what this person did or this person's
yeah,
decision. But ultimately, the decision making is within yourself. And, to take it away from this, COVID situation, I was at the beginning of my story, or the story I shared with you, you know, and I don't know what your background is, but you were on the trajectory of being, an IP attorney, right? I was on the trajectory of working within corporate. I could have very easily said, well, I wasn't raised to do, to listen to myself, or, I'm already working within corporate.
yeah,
So those are just going to be dreams that I'll have, and I'll just stay in the spiritual closet. I got to a point where I had to take 100% responsibility and accountability for my life experience. And I decided that the story that I was going to live was going to be the story of a woman who stood in her truth, and of a woman who moved toward her spiritual resonance versus away from it. A woman who took it out of the closet and who's going to who owns who she is and what she was brought to this, planet to do. I could very easily, I made a very good salary. I was an executive. I was fine in corporate. I didn't have an awful experience, right? But ultimately, only you know who you really are and what you really want to be up to during this lifetime. That matters. It matters. And if you take accountability for how your story plays out, and if you
Yeah.
understand that the language that you use and the ways that you move toward what you want will get you to where you want to be, if you can live that and believe that story,
Mhm.
then you're going to be a much happier person. And by you being a happier person and a more in tuned person, that will result in you living and having created a much better world for yourself.
I love that. That's absolutely resonates with me. And being in alignment to who you are and what you meant to
Yeah.
do. Like you said, my dream when I was in law school is be at a big firm, go through that partner track. And, series of events led me to realize that's not actually my dream. That's
Hmm.
not the life I want. And I'm still doing stuff. I'm working with entrepreneurs and small businesses as an IT attorney and business law attorney, but I'm doing it my way and it's having so much better.
Yeah, and that's what
But
matters. Like, you don't have to throw it all away. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't mean that you can be, 15 years into your career and just, that's it, I'm going to go Like, you don't have to do
yeah,
that. But just consider you in your life story. Consider you. And if
yeah,
you, when you start to consider you, it's like this biblical, scripture, love your neighbor as you love yourself. We focus so much on the love your neighbor part and the
that was,
listening to, right. But it's as you love yourself. Until
mhm.
you love yourself and heal or ensure that you're in alignment with yourself, it's going to be really challenging for you in your relationships with other people, with your work, with the world, with what's happening around us. That becomes so much more difficult, unless you really are handling the loving yourself part.
I love it. Thank you, Lisa. And I
Thank you, Gayani.
for joining me today. And if you like this discussion, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And I will put all the information how to connect with Lisane about her program that's coming up for Shaping Freedom, the Facebook group info, so you could reach out to her directly below this video. And thank you again for joining me and see
Thank
you next
you.
time. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.